This page is the front cover of 64 magazine. The main feature is a huge 10-page UK review for Conker's Bad Fur Day, with the cover declaring it potentially the greatest and sickest N64 game of all time. The cover features a large image of Conker himself. There's also big news about the Game Boy Advance launching in Japan, with first reviews promised inside. You can see small screenshots showcasing Conker's Bad Fur Day, Alone in the Dark, Pokémon Puzzle League, and the GBA title Mario Advance. The cover highlights Nintendo systems, including the GameCube, N64, GB Advance, and Game Boy Color. Additionally, there's a plus section listing reviews or previews for many other games, such as Aiden Chronicles, F-Zero Advance, Simpsons, Treehouse of Horror, and N64 titles like Star Wars Episode 1, Battle for Naboo, and Dr. Mario 64. This page features the magazine's editorial and a Meet the Team spread. The editorial confirms the highly anticipated Game Boy Advance has arrived at the office following its Japanese launch and is exceeding all expectations. It also looks ahead to the GameCube launch at E3. The team feature takes a look back to 1989, showing childhood photos of the staff members. Roy reminisces about the original Game Boy and Super Mario Land. Paul, or Sonic the Hedgehog, loved DuckTales, and Alex remembers Game Boy Tennis. Images of the GameCube, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, and N64 are shown. There's also a large advert for mobile phone ringtones and graphics. This page is the contents of the magazine, showing the headline features including the highly anticipated Conker's Bad Fur Day for the N64. There's also a big splash for Mario Advance and F-Zero Advance, celebrating the arrival of the new Game Boy Advance system, which links back to the editorial last page. This page is the 64 Showcase section, covering the latest Nintendo news. The big story is the PAL Game Boy Advance launch being finalized for June 22nd, only 11 days after the US launch. They list several launch titles including Super Mario Advance, F-Zero, Castlevania, and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. There's also news about upcoming GBA titles from Activision like Spider-Man, Mysterio's Menace, X-Men, and Doom, plus Capcom bringing SNES classics like Final Fight and Super Street Fighter 2 to the handheld. Nintendo themselves are porting Metroid, Super Mario World, Yoshi's Island, and Super Mario Bros. 3. In the Total Games Tidbits section, the big news is Rare's N64 game Dinosaur Planet is confirmed to be cancelled for the N64 and moving to the GameCube. There's also mention of the Conker team already working on a GameCube project and an update on the GameCube US launch timing. This page covers the ongoing anticipation for E3 and the next generation console battle, with Microsoft's Xbox facing off against Nintendo's GameCube. There's a strong quote from Dennis Dyack of Silicon Knights expressing confidence in what they're doing on GameCube. Good to see developers feeling positive about the new machine. Also, Namco is getting on board with GameCube development, which is brilliant news given their history. They even mention NEC starting production on the console hardware. For the Game Boy Advance, there's a mention of DK Games bringing classic SNES titles over, plus details on a new title coming called Lady Shia, which the screenshots make look quite promising. There are competitions running, one for Game Boy Color games like Elevator Action and Extreme Sports, and another with KFC. And of course, they've got the latest Nintendo 64 and Game Boy Top 10 charts listed. This page is the letters section where readers write in with their thoughts and questions. One reader asks about flight simulator games on the N64, mentioning Aerofighters Assault, Airport Inc., Top Gun, and Harrier 2001, and also inquiring about potential flight sims or light gun games for the upcoming GameCube. The magazine replies that Aerofighters Assault is more arcade-like, and that Airport Inc., Top Gun, and Harrier 2001 are likely no longer in development, but recommends Rogue Squadron as a good N64 flying game. They also touch on the possibility of light gun games. Inkawarin. Another letter comes from the Star Prize winner, expressing huge enthusiasm for the GameCube and contrasting it favorably with the PlayStation 2 and Xbox. They highlight some classic foreign 64 games they love, like Zelda, Mario, Donkey Kong, Vigilante 8, Quake 2, and Mario Tennis, and believe the GameCube's game longevity and GBA's portability will make Nintendo the winner in the next generation. The magazine agrees with their assessment, particularly praising Nintendo's ability to make games people play for years. There's also a question about getting NFL Blitz 2001 on N64 in the UK, to which the magazine confirms the reviewed version was an import, and the game didn't get a UK release. Jektai. The page features screenshots from a flight sim, NFL Blitz 2001, and a first-person shooter that looks like the world is not enough, or GoldenEye. There is also an advert for Dreamcast magazine. This page features more of the reader's letters, covering a range of topics from console futures to game specifics. One chap is sad to see Sega leave the hardware business, having played all their consoles over the years alongside his Nintendo machines like the NES and Game Boy. The magazine agrees Sega were brilliant at making games, even if the marketing wasn't always spot on. Another letter asks about the upcoming GameCube, N64 longevity, online play, and release details, mentioning N64 favorites like GoldenEye, Banjo-Kazooie, Zelda, ISS, and Perfect Dark, which the magazine confirms are still keeping people busy. There's also a correction about the number of Pokémon in Gold and Silver, clearing up the confusion about Celebi and the version-specific creatures. Finally, someone writes in to defend classic games like Zelda, WWF No Mercy, and Perfect Dark against any negative opinions. The page features pictures of the Sega Dreamcast, the Nintendo GameCube, Ash and Pikachu from Pokémon, and a wrestler. This page kicks off with a look at Tweety and the magical jewel for the Game Boy Advance. It's presented as a party-style board game, where you pick a Looney Tunes character and trek across an environment playing mini-games to collect jewels to free Tweety. The screenshots show off the colorful board game map and some of the mini-game action. Next up is Pokémon Stadium, Gold and Silver for the Nintendo 64. This is the second Stadium game, designed to work with Pokémon Gold and Silver on the Game Boy Color. It lets you transfer your Pokémon from the handheld games for 3D battles and features new minigames. The article mentions the US release is on the cards, and the UK release is set for summer. Screenshots display the familiar 3D Pokémon battles and the breeding mechanics, Tacanics. Finally, there's a preview of Earthworm Jim, also for the Game Boy Advance. This is a port of the classic SNES platformer, known for its unique humor and action. The article states, it aims to replicate the original game's feel, with some improvements and mentions battling various characters from the series. Screenshots showcase the platforming gameplay and boss encounters. This page gives us a look at the two new Zelda games for the Game Boy Color, Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons. It highlights how these are two separate adventures that link together, almost like one massive quest split across two carts. Oracle of Ages focuses on time travel with a harp, while Oracle of Seasons uses a rod to change the seasons, altering the environment and puzzles. The article explains that completing one game lets you get a password to start the other, unlocking extra bits and pieces. It shows off a few screenshots illustrating the classic top-down Zelda action and environmental changes. Both games did come out here in the UK back in March 2001 as planned. This page looks at a couple of upcoming titles. The news first up is a preview of Dr. Mario 64. As you'd remember, Dr. Mario was that classic puzzler, a bit like Tetris but with matching colored pills to clear viruses. It had been on the NES, Game Boy, and SNES. This N64 version was set to bring the familiar gameplay to the system, promising updated features like 4-player support and some new characters, specifically showing off those pesky viruses. The article mentions a planned first-quarter release and a fairly low price point, hinting it could be a good pickup. Shame it never actually saw a UK release though, only coming out in Japan and North America. Below that we have a look at Snoopy Tennis, destined for the Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance. This was part of Infogrames' deal to make Snoopy games. It's a tennis game featuring the Peanuts characters like Charlie Brown and Lucy, with various courts and modes including championship and even squash. The graphics are praised for looking like the original comic drawings. The preview suggests it might lack the depth of something like Mario Tennis, but still looks promising as a straightforward tennis game. Finally, there's an image teasing the upcoming GameCube console and controller. This article previews Aiden Chronicles. The First Mage, a turn-based RPG, developed by H2O Entertainment for the N64, released in 2001. Players assume the role of Alaron, a knight drawn into a quest involving ancient powers. The game features exploration, tactical combat, and item collection. Despite potential pacing issues, the preview suggests the game offers engaging combat encounters. Screenshots showcase combat, exploration in diverse environments, and UE elements. Memorable visuals include grotesque creatures and an orc queen, hinting at the game's humorous side. Aiden Chronicles, a rare traditional RPG on the N64, provided a unique experience compared to the system's action-adventure titles. The article also briefly teases the upcoming Nintendo GameCube. Porky. This page continues the preview of Aiden Chronicles, the first mage for the N64. It discusses the game's combat system, highlighting that while it's turn-based like classic RPGs such as Final Fantasy or Ultima, Aiden makes it more action-packed. Instead of simple menu selections, you have time to aim and attack, and opponents move within a restricted space. The rounds feel quick, making the turn-based nature less apparent. The article also touches on the game's presentation, noting the graphics are dated in some areas, like the Dairy Lee-sized triangles characters, but the environments and especially the castle scenes are impressive, featuring lighting that changes with the time of day. It mentions how the main character, Alaron, interacts with the environment, with factors like the time of day affecting movement speed. The weather effects, particularly the rain, are also noted as adding atmosphere, although they appear frequently. Overall, the preview suggests Aiden Chronicles looks like it could be something special, offering a different kind of RPG experience on the N64. However, it concludes that the final verdict on whether it's truly a genuine article will have to wait for the full review in the next issue. Screenshots on the page show various character models, combat scenarios against creatures like giant rats, and environmental scenes including forests and castles. This page covers a preview of Alone in the Dark, specifically the version for the Game Boy Color. It dives into the premise of the game, where you play as Edward Carnby heading to the ominously named Shadow Island after his friend Charles Fisk gets into trouble while valuing an antique. The main goal is to find out what happened to Fisk, which involves dealing with Indians, statuettes, and mystical spirits. The preview highlights the game's visual presentation, noting that the backgrounds are static, but the character scales as they move, creating an impressive illusion of 3D depth on the handheld. The scenery itself is described as beautifully drawn, looking better than many other GBC titles seen at the time. Gameplay is pegged as survival horror, meaning you'll be solving puzzles by searching for objects and avoiding various unfriendly creatures. It points out that the puzzles and clues aren't always straightforward, requiring careful exploration. The article mentions they were playing an unfinished build with some bugs, but still found the game to be looking very impressive and worth watching out for a full review. Screenshots show off a variety of environments, from detailed interiors like a bedroom and study, to more atmospheric outdoor areas and dungeons, giving a good feel for the game's look. This page is all about the upcoming Nintendo Game Boy Advance, heralding it as a big step up for handheld gaming. It highlights the new console's key features, including a wider screen, more colors, and improved sound quality, noting the addition of L and R buttons for better control. The article mentions its backward compatibility, meaning it plays your old Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. There's a comparison drawing parallels between its 32-bit processing power and systems like the PlayStation and Saturn, albeit without the polygon capabilities of those machines. It points out that developers are already lined up to make games for it, with Nintendo's big series like Mario, Wario, Kirby and F-Zero mentioned, alongside the surprising news of a Tekken game from Namco and Sega bringing Sonic and Choo Choo Rocket. The Game Boy Advance launched with strong initial support, evidenced by a long list of upcoming games. Previews highlighted 3 exciting titles. Mario Kart Advance brought the SNES Classic to the handheld, promising familiar characters, tracks, and gameplay. Sonic the Hedgehog, surprisingly appearing in a Nintendo magazine, featured the Sega mascot in a GBA game based on the Mega Drive version, boasting enhanced visuals. Lastly, Konami's All-Star Racing, a kart racer, pitted Konami's own characters from franchises like Castlevania and Metal Gear Solid against each other, aiming to surpass Mario Kart with its fresh design. The Game Boy Advance launch is shaping up with promising titles. Hudson's Pinnaby Quest of Heart, a platformer developed by Artoon, features a robot bee hero and vibrant visuals. Rayman Advance, a port of the classic, offers familiar platforming in a 2-player mode. Konami's Castlevania brings the series' signature vampire-slaying action to GBA. Bomberman returns to its 2D roots, offering the beloved maze gameplay for up to 4 players. Finally, F-Zero makes a comeback with the SNES Classic, including new tracks and vehicles designed for high-speed racing on the GBA. The Game Boy Advance lineup is expanding. Sega's Choo Choo Rocket brings the Dreamcast puzzle game to the GBA, with potential online multiplayer. Kuru Kuru Kururin, a unique maze game, is also coming. Mr. Driller 2 offers improved graphics and levels over its Game Boy Color predecessor. Capcom's Mega Man XE is a turn-based RPG departure for the series. Tekken Advance is planned, bringing the PlayStation fighting game to Nintendo. Mario Advance, a Super Nintendo port, is highlighted for its enhanced GBA presentation. The "Also on the Cards" section reveals other upcoming titles: Napoleon, Wings, Pocket GT Advance, Golden Sun, Red Hot Dodgeball Fighters, Advance Wars, Game Boy Wars, Star Communicator, and Tactics Ogre Gaiden, showcasing the variety of genres. This page dives into the magazine's review section, highlighted by a big feature on Conker's Bad Fur Day, that classic, slightly controversial N64 title, getting down and dirty with an alcoholic tree rat. It also continues looking at the Game Boy Advance lineup, featuring reviews for Mario Advance, F-Zero Advance, Mickey Speedway USA, and others, following on from the previews discussed previously. Crucially, the page explains the magazine's entire review process, detailing what the scores for graphics, audio, gameplay and challenge mean, and how the final percentage breakdown works, alongside the purpose of the various information boxes used throughout their reviews. This page is all about Conker's Bad Fur Day, diving into the review of Rare's famously adult platformer. It immediately sets the tone, mentioning the pooing, peeing, swearing and farting, and asks if it's the coolest N64 game ever. The review highlights the fact that Conker's tale starts with him having a bit too much to drink and waking up in a ditch. It touches on the game's mature themes and violence, noting that while previews might have missed the point, the gameplay itself is absolutely fan-frigging-tastic, calling it a definite contender for the greatest N64 game of all time. There's even a sidebar called "That's Just Sick," describing the rather dark section involving a baby dinosaur. Screenshots show Conker facing a bull, navigating a fiery cave, and interacting with the aforementioned dino. This page continues the review of Conker's Bad Fur Day, explaining more about the gameplay mechanics and introducing the cast of characters. It highlights how Conker's initial hungover state affects his ability to move, making actions like jumping difficult. The key gameplay element discussed is the context-sensitive B button, found on specific pads, which performs different actions depending on the situation Conker is in, effectively replacing a multitude of unique moves. Screenshots demonstrate this mechanic in action, showing Conker interacting with various elements or characters. The page also includes a Dramatis Personae section, giving brief descriptions of several memorable characters Conker encounters throughout his journey, including the star himself, Greg the Grim Reaper, the Panther King, and Ooga Booga. The review strongly praises the game, declaring it the best Rare has produced up to this point. This page continues the Conker's Bad Fur Day review, diving deeper into the gameplay mechanics. It explains how Conker's moveset is less about learning complex button combinations, and more about using the context-sensitive B button in specific spots, which is a departure from earlier Rare titles. Key moves like the jump, hover, and the trusty frying pan weapon are highlighted. The revolutionary lighting system is praised, noting how real-time shadows actually affect platforming. The review also addresses the game's controversial 15 certificate, explaining it's due to swearing and gore, but clarifies it's the animated animal characters, not realistic humans, that are depicted. There's a brilliant section titled "Saturday Night at the Movies," showing off 10 different movie parodies cleverly hidden within the game, from Aliens and the Blair Witch Project to Saving Private Ryan and the Terminator, showcasing Rare's sense of humor and cultural references. Finally, a humorous sidebar titled "Do Squirrels Drink Beer?" details a real-world experiment to see if squirrels would partake, complete with photographic evidence. It's a bit daft, but entertaining, and fits the game's tone. Lots of screenshots showing Berry, Conker, the movie nods, and the squirrel experiment. This page continues the Conker's Bad Fur Day review, kicking off with a look at the communal Conker multiplayer suite. It details the 6 different game modes available, including Beach, Heist, Race, Raptor, Tank and War, offering a range of deathmatch and objective-based fun for up to 4 players. The main game review goes into more depth on the gameplay mechanics and overall experience. It touches upon the game's difficulty in the strictly scatological section, noting that while challenging, it's generally fair. The tree-hugging part discusses the unique puzzle structure that drives progression, differing from typical collectathons and featuring varied, unusual tasks. Other gameplay examples mentioned include tackling zombies and a specific mission involving explosive gas. The page is packed with screenshots showcasing various moments from the multiplayer modes and the main adventure. Prominent character images feature Conker himself, the prehistoric beach babe Berry, and the distinctive queen bee. There's even a picture of a chocolate bar, a nod to one of the game's contextual items. It really highlights the game's visual flair and offbeat humor. Conker's Bad Fur Day receives high praise in this review, highlighting its dark humor, swearing, and engaging gameplay. The game's difficulty curve is balanced by quick recovery options, encouraging players to persevere through challenging puzzles. The review emphasizes the game's variety, comparing it to an interactive movie, with seamlessly integrated cutscenes and gameplay, offering incredible entertainment value. The game's imaginative and hilarious nature, including cameos and unique elements like a hoverboard section, are celebrated. The review also mentions a luxurious launch party in London. A second opinion calls it one of the greatest games ever played, culminating in an overall score of 96% due to Rare's impeccable work on the title. The next page takes a look at Mario Advance for the new Game Boy Advance system. It covers the game's history, noting this is the third release of Super Mario Bros. 2, which originally started life as Dream Factory, Doki Doki Panic in Japan, before being adapted to include Mario, Luigi, Toad, and Princess Daisy. The review highlights the classic platforming gameplay, involving picking up and throwing enemies and objects, along with the updated graphics compared to the original NES version, shown in the screenshots. It mentions the game supports link cable play and saves, developed by Nintendo in Japan and released around 2001. The summary points out the classic gameplay and updated visuals as positives, while noting it's essentially a port of Super Mario Bros. 2 with a few annoying elements. This page continues the review of Mario Advance, delving into the gameplay, which requires a fair bit of skill but is utterly addictive despite any frustration. There's a note about the Game Boy Advance's speaker sound being a bit tinny but improving dramatically with headphones, highlighting the rich music and sound effects. A big bonus is the inclusion of Mario Bros. Classic, a neat 4-player head-to-head mode using the link cable where you kick enemies to score points. Great fun with mates. The review touches upon the different abilities of characters like Luigi, Peach, and Toad, adding depth. Overall, it concludes that despite being based on an older game, it's a truly great package for the GBA, earning an impressive 92% overall score, with the soundbite stating, "Mario is back on the scene looking as good as he ever did." There's also a diagram showing the Game Boy Advance controls. This page features a review of Scooby-Doo Classic Creep Capers for the Game Boy Color. It covers the familiar Mystery Inc. gang-solving mysteries. The game is described as an RPG of sorts, where you explore environments, collect items, and tackle puzzles, switching between characters who each have unique skills. It's highlighted as being aimed at a younger audience and fairly simple to play, with nice graphics and cutscenes. The review notes that while it's fun, it lacks depth and isn't overly challenging, being quite short. It mentions the game is a good title for younger players who enjoy the classic cartoon. The overall score is 70%, with a soundbite noting it's an entertaining puzzle game, but short on levels. There are several screenshots showing the characters and environments in the game's pixel art style. As I recall, there was also a classic Creep Capers title on the N64 around this time, so it's interesting to see the GBC take on it. This review highlights the Game Boy Advance version of F-Zero. It emphasizes the game's blistering speed, comparable to the original SNES title, and its faithful recreation of the classic F-Zero experience. The review praises the visuals, which closely resemble the SNES version while looking great on the GBA, and the addictive, pick-up-and-play gameplay. The game offers substantial content, including multiple race series, difficulty levels, and a multiplayer mode. Vehicles and controls are described in detail. Overall, the reception is overwhelmingly positive, with high marks for graphics, audio, gameplay, and challenge. The review concludes with a strong recommendation, calling it a must-buy for GBA owners, and awarding it a score of 92%. This page dives into Pokémon Puzzle League on the N64. It's a puzzle game that, despite being a Pokémon title, stands up as a great puzzler in its own right. The gameplay is straightforward, swapping blocks to make matches and chains as they rise up, incredibly simple to learn but seriously addictive. You navigate through the puzzle village, taking on challenges in places like Professor Oak's labs and various stadiums. The game features familiar faces like Ash, Pikachu, and other Pokémon characters throughout the menus and cutscenes, adding to the theme. It's highlighted for its addictive nature and enjoyable two-player mode, although the music gets a specific mention, perhaps not for the best reasons. It's a solid, challenging puzzle game that fits right into the N64 library. The screenshots showcase the gameplay itself, the character selection screen featuring Ash, Misty, and others, and scenes from the game's intro and menu areas. This page continues the look at Pokémon Puzzle League on the N64. It goes into more detail about the different ways to play, like clearing set lines, the head-to-head battles where you can send block obstacles to your opponent by making big combos, and the Puzzle University mode offering fixed puzzles to solve with limited moves. It highlights the game's speed and how tricky it gets on higher settings, but also notes the Puzzle University offers a different pace. The review mentions the game's highly addictive nature, especially the two-player mode, and touches on the option for a 3D mode which changes the perspective. The only real complaints seem to be that the main gameplay might become repetitive for some after a while, and, apparently, the music isn't the best. It also covers the PAL version's performance, confirming no borders and no slowdown compared to the import. There's a clear diagram showing the N64 controller inputs for the game. Ultimately, the game scores an impressive 87% with the soundbite summing it up as great Pokémon-themed puzzle challenge action. This page reviews The Simpsons, Treehouse of Horror, on the Game Boy Color. It covers the game based on the popular TV show's Halloween specials, featuring the Simpson family trapped in a nightmare where each character must complete a challenge. The review notes that the graphics do a good job of recreating the characters and environments seen in the show, with screenshots depicting various scenes including Homer looking stressed, Maggie as a fly, Homer in a Star Wars stormtrooper costume, Bart, and others. Despite the visual appeal, the game is heavily criticized for its slow gameplay, particularly the character movement, which makes combat and avoiding enemies frustratingly difficult. The objectives are also called obscure, adding to the frustration. The password system is described as particularly bad. Ultimately, the strong graphics can't save the poor gameplay, leading to an overall score of 55%, summarized as a colorful but deeply unsatisfying game. This page reviews Mickey Speedway USA on the Game Boy Color. It's a cartoon racer featuring Mickey and the gang, including Minnie, Daisy, Donald, Goofy and Pete, as they try to save Pluto. The game offers various modes like single-player, time trial, and two-player options using link cable or infrared. The tracks cover different locations across the USA, filled with power-ups like pickups and oil slicks, viewed from an overhead perspective. The review notes that the cars handle beautifully, and the tracks are cool and colorful, providing competitive racing fun. While the concept isn't groundbreaking, having been done before, including on the N64, the execution is praised. Screenshots show the overhead racing view in different environments, character portraits for Donald and Mickey with stats, menu screens, and some humorous character images. The review gives it high marks for graphics, audio, and gameplay, leading to an impressive overall score of 92%. The soundbite calls it a top-quality title for cartoon racers. Alternatives like Wacky Races and Toy Story Racer are also listed. This page is an advert from Gameplay, highlighting special offers on Game Boy Color consoles and games, alongside deals on Nintendo 64 consoles, peripherals, and games like Banjo-Tooie and The Legend of Zelda, Majora's Mask, with free delivery available. This page features a look at Star Wars Episode R, Battle for Naboo, a cracking vehicle-based shoot-'em-up published by LucasArts. It throws you into the thick of the action surrounding the first prequel film, letting you pilot various craft like land speeders, gunboats and starfighters across diverse mission types from escort duty to outright assault. The article praises the presentation, highlighting the impressive graphics that get even better with the expansion pack, and the immersive audio featuring John Williams' score, effects, and speech. There's also a mention of the handy hang-about feature that lets you switch vehicles during missions. The game is described as easy to get into but difficult to put down, offering plenty of challenges and building on the success of games like Rogue Squadron. The screenshots showcase the gameplay across land and air. This page gives us the rundown on Star Wars Episode R, Battle for Naboo, another cracking vehicle-based shooter that follows on from Rogue Squadron. It's certainly one for the most wanted list if you enjoyed Factor 5's previous work, though it's noted there might be slightly less freedom to explore compared to Rogue Squadron. Still, it's called a great game with solid gameplay. The UK version performs just as well as the imports, with no noticeable difference in speed. You've got multiple viewing options while playing, including a standard view, a closer one behind your craft, and a first-person cockpit view, which is always a nice touch. The controls are laid out clearly, showing how you handle your ship for movement, firing and changing views. Gameplay involves flying various craft through different missions, often protecting targets or engaging enemy forces. While the action is non-stop, and there's plenty of challenge, it can sometimes feel a bit repetitive. Screenshots show the game in action across different environments and from various camera angles. Overall, it gets a strong rating, scoring an impressive 90%. The soundbite mentions the non-stop action and big explosions contributing to the excitement. It's definitely a title worth checking out for any N64 fan, especially if you're into Star Wars or enjoyed Rogue Squadron. This page switches gears a bit to cover a game on the Game Boy Color, but it's Toy Story Racer, which is interesting given the franchise's popularity. The review asks if it's the best Game Boy racer to date. Wait. It goes over how big the Toy Story films were, and notes that previous video game tie-ins weren't always the most exciting, but this racer is seen as a real step up for the Game Boy. The review highlights that the game features courses designed in a 3D perspective, which was quite impressive for the hardware at the time, featuring environments like under tables and through petrol stations. It really gives a feeling of speed. You get power-ups during the races, and while there are limitations like only 4 playable characters from the film and just 10 tracks, the racing itself is described as challenging and keeps opponents right on your tail, which makes it addictive. The game is ultimately praised as one of the best races on the Game Boy seen up to that point, especially noting how good Game Boy Color games could look and play. Screenshots show the racing view from a slightly elevated perspective, with various environments and racers like Woody in go-karts. Character images of Woody, Buzz Lightyear and Rex are prominent. It scores a cracking 90% overall, with strong ratings across graphics, audio, gameplay, and challenge. The soundbite confirms it's a truly wonderful racer that needed to be seen to be believed. This page features a review for The Lion King, Simba's mighty adventure on the Game Boy Color, a different console than the N64, but it's interesting to see what else was around at the time. The review looks at Disney's classic Lion King, brought to the portable scene by Activision and Taurus Games. It touches upon the premise of Simba's journey, noting that rather than making a hyper-realistic lion sim, they've gone for an animated adventure. The gameplay is described as fairly standard platforming, with some top-down sections providing a bit of variety, like chasing down wildebeest as seen in the screenshots. While the graphics are decent for the hardware, and the character animation is highlighted positively in the 64,000 questions section, the review feels the levels themselves are a bit dull, and mentions issues with collision detection and small sprites. It seems the game had some decent ideas but didn't quite nail the execution compared to other strong platformers available on the GBC. The review points to Donkey Kong Country and Jungle Book as better alternatives if you were after a solid platformer on the go at this point. Overall, Simba's Mighty Adventure scores a 67%, which puts it squarely in average territory according to the soundbite. Also on the page is a competition to win tickets to the Royal International Air Tattoo, a huge air show which is a bit of a change of pace from the gaming content. Scorezone highlights reader achievements in N64 games. This month's winner is Andrea Earwicker. The section features a guide, Enter the Zone, explaining how to submit scores. The page showcases top scores and times in titles like Star Wars, Shadows of the Empire, Diddy Kong Racing, GoldenEye, 1080 Degrees Snowboarding, The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, Quake 2, Extreme G2, The World Is Not Enough, Donkey Kong 64, Yoshi's Story, Tetrasphere, Perfect Dark, and even Pokémon Snap. The section encourages readers to submit scores for newly released games. Shadows of the Empire. This page continues the Scorezone feature, showcasing more top reader times and scores across several N64 games including Star Wars, Episode 1 Racer, Mario Kart 64, Micro Machines, Star Wars, Rogue Squadron, Quake 64, Banjo-Kazooie, and Monster Truck Madness. It also highlights the Scorezone Challenge, asking for submissions on games like The World Is Not Enough and Pokémon Snap. The Ultimate Player Award is detailed, given monthly to the Scorezone champion, with the prize being a Logic 3 steering wheel. Additionally, there's information on the 64 Solutions Cheats hotline for getting game tips. This page kicks off the A to Z section for hints, tips and cheats for loads of N64 games. It's packed with passwords, codes, and unlockable info for titles like Banjo-Kazooie, Diddy Kong Racing, Body Harvest, Bomberman Hero, Battle Tanks, Global Assault, Charlie Blast's Territory, and loads more from racing games to shooters. You've got plenty of classic characters splashed across the page as well, which is always good to see. This page continues the A to Z of Cheat Central, absolutely crammed full of hints, tips and passwords for your favorite Nintendo 64 games. It's got everything from Diddy Kong Racing cheats for making characters tiny or unlocking free items, through to serious codes for games like Doom 64 and Duke Nukem, giving you invincibility, all weapons, and access to levels. You'll find codes for GoldenEye, naturally, covering things like all guns, unlimited ammo, and invisibility in multiplayer, along with tips for games like Harvest Moon 64. They even chuck in cheats for Fighters Destiny, International Superstar Soccer 98, and Jet Force Gemini. The page is brilliant, showcasing character models from loads of classic N64 titles like Diddy Kong Racing, Banjo-Kazooie, Toy Story 2 and Duke Nukem, alongside screenshots of Doom 64, GoldenEye, and Harvest Moon. Proper useful stuff. This page continues the massive Cheat Central feature, offering loads more codes and tips for popular N64 titles. You'll find plenty here for games like Mace, The Dark Age, including ways to fight as hidden characters like Gar Gunderson or Ichiro, and use selective ammo. There are extensive cheats for Mario Party, covering things like getting stars and coins, unlocking stages, and even hidden characters like Bowser. The page also delves into Mission Impossible with codes for silencers and invincibility, and multiple entries for Mortal Kombat 4 and Mortal Kombat Trilogy, helping you unlock fighters like Goro and Shao Kahn, access hidden modes, and gain advantages in combat. Mickey's Speedway USA gets a mention for unlocking Louis, and Mischief Makers has a tip for farming infinite red rubies. There are also codes for Multi-Racing Championship for guaranteed victories, and NFL Blitz 2001 with a list of player pins. The page is packed with images, showcasing characters from games like Jet Force Gemini, Mace, The Dark Age, Mortal Kombat, South Park, Toy Story 2, and Donkey Kong 64, alongside screenshots from many of the covered games including Mario Golf, Micro Machines 64, and Mischief Makers. This page continues the massive Cheat Central feature, offering even more ways to break N64 games wide open. You'll find cheat codes and passwords for titles like Nuclear Strike, Off-Road Challenge, and Ogre Battle 64. There are detailed sections for Perfect Dark, including getting gold medals, and a massive list of passwords for Quake 2 levels. Plenty of entries for Rampage and Rampage 2 cover unlocking characters and accessing cheat menus. Ready to Rumble Boxing and its sequel have codes for unlocking boxers by completing the game multiple times. Resident Evil 2 gets some love with invincibility and infinite ammo cheats. Road Rash 64, Robotron 64, and Rush 2, Extreme Racing USA also have various codes. The page is absolutely plastered with vibrant artwork featuring characters from South Park, Donkey Kong 64, Toy Story 2, Turok, Quake and Rampage, alongside screenshots showing gameplay from Rampage, Ready to Rumbles, and Road Rash 64. This page continues the look at Cheat Central, packed with even more ways to get ahead in some classic N64 titles. You've got cheat codes and methods for unlocking tracks, battle arenas, and even extra cars by hitting score targets in games like those racing and stunt challenges. There's a huge section dedicated to passwords for unlocking circuits and races across various difficulty levels in different games. Plenty of cheats are listed for South Park and South Park Rally, offering unlocks for things like invincibility, weapons, character skins, and revealing hidden characters. For Spider-Man, there's a whole list of codes to access the cheat menu, granting everything from full health and invincibility to unlocking different costumes and comic books. Star Wars Episode I Racer gets extensive coverage with codes for invincibility, accessing bonus art, controlling different aspects of the race, and even unlocking characters and game modes. 1080 Degree Snowboarding has details on unlocking courses and different borders. Snowboard Kids also provides methods for unlocking characters, boards, and courses, along with tips for turbo starts. Space Station Silicon Valley gets a mention for an alternate intro sequence. The page is visually busy, featuring character art from South Park, Donkey Kong 64, Toy Story 2, Crash Bandicoot, Duke Nukem, Star Wars and others, alongside screenshots showing gameplay from titles like Road Rash 64 and Snowboard Kids. It's a proper treasure trove for anyone looking to explore every nook and cranny of these games back in the day. This page continues the Cheat Central section, offering codes and tips for unlocking characters, levels, modes and invincibility across a heap of N64 games like Turok 2, Zelda, Road Rash 64, and many more. It's packed with character art and game screenshots. This page is dedicated to special offers from 64 magazine, including discounted strategy guides for games like Zelda 64 and Donkey Kong 64, plus subscription deals with free games like Mario Kart 64 and Perfect Dark. This page is the Nindex, which is the magazine's comprehensive guide covering every Nintendo 64 game they've reviewed. It's laid out really clearly, with keys explaining what all the symbols mean for player counts and peripheral support like the Rumble Pack and Expansion Pack, and colors denoting game genres like adventure or racing. There's a list of genres with descriptions too. Right there on the left you've got a massive illustration featuring Link alongside the creepy Majora's Mask moon and some other characters from the games. Gistler. The Nindex itself is presented as a big table, giving you the game name, who published it, player options, what accessories it uses, if it was a UK release, which issue it was reviewed in, the percentage score, and a brief comment about the game. Scores get a Sizzler award for 90% and above, and a gold medal for 95% and above. Those are the absolute must-haves. On the right, they've got their Our Top 10 list. You can see screenshots there for games like Paper Mario, Banjo-Tooie, Perfect Dark, and what's labeled as Zelda 2 but is clearly Ocarina of Time in the picture. Easily one of the best games ever made, that. It's a great way to see their highest-rated games quickly. The whole section is a brilliant resource for anyone looking for info on any N64 game. This page continues the Nindex, the magazine's rundown of every game they've covered. It carries on the massive list, detailing games from Donkey Kong 64 through to Mystical Ninja, starring Goemon 2, showing the player counts, accessory support, the score they got, and a little comment about each one. Always useful for finding out which games were crackers and which were a bit pants. On the side there you've got a few of their 64 top lists, breaking down the best games in different genres. The shoot-'em-ups list highlights games like Perfect Dark and GoldenEye, which were absolute classics for the N64's multiplayer. The adventure games list features The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, naturally, as well as Paper Mario and Resident Evil 2. There's also the platform games list, showing Banjo-Tooie and Donkey Kong 64, both top-notch platformers on the system. And the fighting games list, with Tom and Jerry and the WWF games dominating, showing some decent brawlers were available. Finally, the 4-player games list calls out some of the best games for getting your mates round, again featuring Perfect Dark and GoldenEye, along with IS Sin 8 and WWF No Mercy. Brilliant fun with a group those were. This page continues the Nindex rundown, covering a huge range of games from NHL Breakaway 99 right through to Yoshi's Story. It's the magazine's record of everything they'd reviewed up to that point, always handy for checking scores and finding out a quick opinion on a game you might have missed. You've also got several of the 64 top lists here, highlighting the best and worst games in certain categories. There's the racing games list, showing F1 World Grand Prix and Championship sharing the top spot, along with Mickey Speedway USA and Ridge Racer 64. Micro Machines Turbo 64 makes the list too, which was a cracker. Tiwa. Then there's the Party/Puzzle list, featuring Buster Move 2, Puyo Puyo Sun 64, and Pokemon Puzzle League. Wetrix is there too, a clever puzzle game that was a bit different. For strategy/simulation games, StarCraft 64 takes the top spot, which was impressive to get working on the console. Command & Conquer is also listed, alongside Premier Manager 64 and Blast Corps, a great action puzzle title. Ogre Battle 64 rounds out that top 5. Hestate. Finally, they've included a list of the 64 top bad games. Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue gets the lowest score here at 25%, with Carmageddon coming in second worst. Clay Fighter 63 and a third and The Glory of St. Andrews are also on this list, as is Superman, which was notoriously poor. This page moves away from the N64 games for a bit, diving into the Nindex for Game Boy Color titles. It gives you a quick rundown of GBC games with their company, save methods, rumble compatibility, issue number, score, and a brief comment, covering a huge range of handheld releases from Air Force Delta to Extreme Wheels. Below that we get the 64 top lists for Game Boy Color. First, the good ones, where Tomb Raider takes the top spot, followed by cracking games like Mario Tennis and Cannon Fodder. Then there's the list of the bad ones, with UFC unfortunately getting the lowest score, and games like Godzilla and Formula 1 2000 also making the list. The main focus of the page is a big feature on getting hold of past issues of 64 magazine. It's got a great graphic showing a stack of old magazines with a little bomb character on top, and it tells you how you can fill gaps in your collection, catch up on reviews, tips, and releases you missed. You can see covers for issues featuring big N64 hitters like Banjo-Tooie, Spider-Man, and Paper Mario, giving you a flavor of what was covered. There's a form below where readers could tick which issues they wanted to order. This page leads with a big preview for Pokémon Stadium 2 on the N64. As the text says, it's a game people either love or hate, much like Marmite. but it was coming back for another round on the console. You see some screenshots showcasing the graphical style and the various Pokémon, including battles and what looks like one of the minigames. Below that, there's a section highlighting the upcoming issue, promising more Game Boy Advance reviews and covering the latest news, reviews and previews for both N64 and Game Boy Color. The main feature on the right is a huge competition, where readers could win loads of prizes by calling premium rate numbers. Among the haul were consoles like a PlayStation 2, a Dreamcast, and yes, you could even bag yourself an N64 console along with some top games. There are also plenty of other gadgets and prizes up for grabs,